Across the globe, justice systems are being reimagined through trauma-informed care, desistance theory, and neuroscience. At the forefront of this movement stands a voice for change, a trainer of professionals, and a storyteller committed to evidence-based reform. This is The Criminologist, the podcast exploring the people, the practices, and the possibilities shaping a more humane justice system. And now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 227 of The Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. I'm Joseph Arvidson, your host, bringing you conversations at the intersection of human services, correctional practice, and lived experience. Today, we are diving into a story of remarkable transformation, a journey from crime to purpose, from justice system to keynote stage. My guest is Arman Vestad, a man who has redefined what it means to turn adversity into opportunity. Once justice involved himself, Arman has emerged as one of Norway's most powerful voices for change. He is a national award-winning public speaker, yes, the best in the country, and his presentations don't just inform, they ignite transformation. Drawing on extreme life experiences, Arman engages audiences across the private and public sectors, helping them dismantle resistance, navigate change, and build cultures rooted in empathy and connection. In this conversation, we will explore what sparked Arman's journey out of crime, how financial wellness became a cornerstone of his mission, and why the path to desistance is about much more than behavior change. It's about identity, relationships, and social reintegration. We'll also talk about his inspiring Run and Smile movement, including Tour de Wave, where Arman runs from city to city, smiling and connecting with complete strangers. Because for him, change just isn't about systems. It's about moments. Moments of connection. Moments of humanity. He's on a mission to teach everyday people how to be that moment for someone else. So whether you're a policymaker, a probation officer, or someone looking to be inspired, you're going to want to hear this one. So please, enjoy my conversation with Arman Vestad, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, welcome to the show, Arman. So glad to have you with us. I'm really looking forward to this interview. I love getting individuals with a variety of perspectives to share their stories. So why don't we kick it off with you introducing yourself to the Criminologist podcast audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and then we're really going to start to unpack the journey that you've been on, which is quite fascinating.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe. I'm really excited, and as you told, I have some background. My name is Arman, and I live in Norway. I'm the father of three, and I live a happy, straightforward life today. But I have been a criminal, and I have been a drug addict, and I have been to prison for several years for things I've done in this past. But I changed my life 20 years ago, and today I use my extreme experience, I would say, to help others coming out from the outcast and from prisons, of course, but also helping people that are helping those individuals trying to get a better life, and also trying to impact the structure behind and work with governments and so on. So, but that's what I'm doing today, Joe. Yeah.
And it's great work that you're doing, Arman. You have transformed your life, as you said, from being justice involved to now, congratulations, becoming an award-winning speaker, as well as a financial wellness expert, which I want to get to a little bit later in the interview. But regular listeners of this show have come to realize that the process of desistance, or of leaving behind a life of crime, is rarely a straight pathway. It's more often a zigzag pathway. When you reflect on your journey, Arman, can you share, were there any of those sort of pivotal moments? I always talk about pathways on people's trajectories and the pathways they choose, but are there a couple of those sort of fork in the road pathways where you realize that in hindsight, those were sort of key milestones that you made a critical decision?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely kind of three key moments in my transformation. But I would like to get some years back to my childhood, because I don't have anything to blame for the life I chose to live. I don't have any kind of. I have good parents, good childhood. Even my brother, which was looking up to me as a big brother, he became a policeman. Same mother, same father, same friends. But I was a bit bullied when I was growing up in high school, and but I solved that with money, because I was buying things. I got some money from my grandfather, and I used those money to fit in for getting the right clothes and to give candy to the other boys that I really wanted to be a part of. But so I managed to change their perception of me with money. But in the end of the day, the money I was receiving from my grandfather wasn't enough to cover my needs, because I was early addicted to money and the feeling the money gave me. And at the age of 15 years old, I stole from my grandfather. And that was the first limit where I crossed the border. And I stole every week from him. And he didn't say anything. So that was a shameful moment in my life. I would say probably the most shameful moments in my whole life. But I didn't become a criminal until I was 21 years old, because I had a steady life. I was going to university. I was getting good grades. I was working at different nightclubs because that was my second income. And there I met people that also had some kind of living a life, how to say it, in both worlds, where they did some criminal things. And I started to be a part of this environment and hanging out with these guys. And suddenly I was making money for selling cars that definitely wasn't mine. And in a while, the police was getting into me. And from there, I stopped living this double life. I had a beautiful girlfriend. I had a beautiful son on 6 months. But when the police was coming, then I moved to the capital of Norway and worked as a full-time criminal and a doorman at the nightclubs. And at that time, I was starting to make my own drugs. I had production kitchens where we made those GHB, the liquid drugs. And it was a lot of money at that time. And I felt like a king, in the beginning. And I could use like $5,000 a day with no problems. And I met celebrities and so it was a fabulous life in the beginning, I would say. But then the drugs were taking over. I started to test it, use it more and more. And I was caught by the police and they took a lot of drugs from me, a lot of money. And suddenly I lost control over my life and finding myself in situations that were really, really far off from the position I've been just a couple of years earlier. And coincidences made me a part of Norway's, I would say, biggest murder case at that time, because I was delivering the guns who were used for a triple homicide there back in 1999. And those people involved and those that got convicted for that, they received 20 years, which is the longest form for conviction in Norway. So that made me a famous criminal. So all my faces were all over the news. And this was a time of my life where I was proud of becoming a famous criminal. I even used it to come on the top of things again, because every criminal that has seen me as a sloppy criminal, because he was a criminal, drug addict now, he wasn't that good criminal anymore. But now when I see my face connected to this big murder case, my reputation started to improve again. And I love that. And just saying that to you now, Joe, is really strange, but that's the way I thought about it at that time.
This is fascinating to me, Arman, for several reasons, but up to and including the fact that I spent much of my career in corrections, probation, parole, training officers on conducting risk assessments, which are a big part of what we do in corrections. But I love speaking to individuals like you who sort of give some color, if you will, or a third dimension to it and takes it out of the research, meta-analysis. We look at big trends and whatnot. But when we speak to the individual like yourself, I think it really adds valuable and necessary context. For example, I was taking notes, and at one point you said you were addicted to money.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people can relate to. However, when you look at, like I said, the sort of established model of what we call the risk needs responsivity model, you don't get that level of sort of individualizing it or that level of granular detail that you could say, oh yeah, I could see how this happened. When you spoke about how even after you got more immersed in the lifestyle, if you will, you were sort of feeding off that. It reminded me, there's a great American movie directed by Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas, which talks about the life and the trajectory of real life gangster Henry Hill. But in the closing minutes of that movie, when he's been relocated into witness protection, he reflects and he says, for me, what I missed the most, it was the lifestyle.
Yeah.
It was, like you said, it was that addicted to the power, addicted to the notoriety, that kind of thing, which I think we forget.
Yeah. And that is something that it's really important for me when I do my talks. And so I talk to people about this. You can't forget that this life also has some kind of good sides, positive sides.
Yeah.
And if you miss that, you will also miss the opportunity to get a relationship to this person, because it will be full of judgmental thing.
Exactly. That is brilliant, Arman. I don't want to turn this into Joe's favorite movies podcast, but that being said, you just reminded me of another great movie out of Scotland, Trainspotting. And at one point, I think it was Ewan McGregor's characters talking about, the sort of lovable band of heroin addicts. But he points out what you just pointed out. He's like, what the public doesn't realize is they see the misery, they see the pain, they see the withdrawals, they see all the ugliness associated with addiction. But they forget there's a flip side to that. We're not stupid. I mean, we do this for a reason. It feels good and the lifestyle's good. And I think that's critical. You just pointed out it's not this binary, like you said, at one point you said something, you had a foot in both worlds, basically. Yeah. Right. And I think the public doesn't understand that. They think, oh, people who are justice involved are like the gangsters we see on TV, that it's their full-time job, their full-time mafioso or street gang or whatever. And it's like, no, there's a lot of gray out there, and we need to understand that gray if we're going to address it.
It's not black and white, Joe. And I say to people that work in this area that there are really many nice criminals, but it can also be people that are not criminal who is not nice. So it's we need to understand that it's much more to cover here than what you can see with your eyes. Which is why whenever I interview an individual with your life experience, I share with them that it's why I'm so happy to see this movement in criminal justice to involve individuals such as yourself, who I often refer to as the true subject matter experts. I can research and look at the trends and the data, but we've got to get your perspective in this to get a full understanding of what justice reform looks like. I mentioned you're an award-winning speaker. I want to hear about that. And tell us about some of your keynote speeches, which, as you've been doing already, are rooted in your extreme life experience. Share with us maybe some of those more powerful lessons that you learned that you'd like to share with others about your process for exiting crime. Well, my speeches, they are rooted in my extreme experiences. I tell them about how I managed to change my life. And most people, they think, oh, you must be an outstanding person. You have so much discipline. You can conquer a Mount Everest. You can do everything you want because you changed your life. But I tell them, well, no, I'm pretty bad most parts in life, like most people. But I am really good in asking for help. I learned that skill, and I learned it from my meetings between my three important human meetings in my life. And I would like to get back to those three, because that's three key lessons I teach in my talks. And the first thing is, I met a policeman at a point in my life where I was really, really depressed, and without any money. I was living a life without any meaning. I've just taken 7 overdoses in 14 days. So that I was alive, what was a miracle, I would say. So under an arrest with 3 policemen coming into my door, they were looking at shotguns, money, and different needles and so on. So instead of arresting me, one of the policemen was sitting down next to me, and he was almost pulling me up to himself because I was lying on the floor there. No, not the floor, but the couch. And he kept his arm around me, and he said, "Well, Arman, this doesn't look good. Is there anything I can do to help you? Just say the words, and I will try to do whatever I can in my position." And I have never felt so close to any person. And you have to understand that this was a policeman. I hated the police. I was trained to shoot them almost, even though I respected them in a way because they were, yeah. But here I was sitting and crying in front of a policeman because he really cared. Is there anything I can do to help you? Have you tried everything? Because this cannot continue. And those 5 minutes were the life-changing things for me. Because my life didn't change at the moment. And he arrested me. He put me into prison. I stayed there for some days. But that 5 minutes gave me, I took his story in my heart. So when I met the next person 6 months later that has extreme skill sets in meeting people in crisis, that was a prison inspector or a prison guard. And she had several months working with me. So I listened to her in a different way because of the policeman story. So I believed in her, and she was the person that actually got me on second thoughts. So she said, "What do you want to do when you stop being a criminal?" And she said, "I see that you love to help others," because I wrote a lot of applications for the other inmates because I was pretty good in writing. But she had seen that I used some misspelling phrases in every application that I did. So she even in my own application. So I couldn't get out of that. But I didn't miss anything at the time because I was criminal. So she said, "Maybe you should be a social worker, Arman." And in the beginning, I was really, what? Do you mean I want to be a social worker? I met thousands of social workers and they don't understand a thing of the life I've lived. But then I changed my mind. And I remember those words I said to Mette. And I said, "Mette, I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to be the best social worker in the world. It should be easy like that." I said to her. I've changed my valuation of myself since. But then I changed and became a social worker, educated myself. And it's a lot, of course, in between here, from stopping to get the social worker. But that was 2 out of 3 really important meetings. And the third important meeting were when I was applying for a job after I was finished educated. And that was not easy, because I didn't have any kind of CV at all. I had just a criminal record. That was all I had. And I asked for a position as a debt advisor in the public government, where the job position is to help people with their personal finances, where they're struggling. And I had actually $200,000 myself in debt at the time. That was pretty, I would say, brave asking for that position. But Kari, the name of this leader of that organization, she said Arman had something very, very interesting in his application. So she fought for me because there were a lot of voices at that office. You should not hire Arman, because if you took a Google search on my name, everything on the weapons were coming out. Murder, weapons, blood, everything, Are you serious? Is he going to be our colleague? Are you crazy, Kari? But Kari was not crazy, and she hired me. And I stayed in this public government for this position for 15 years, and I developed myself, and I got from being a normal debt advisor to be a national leader for the public government with responsibility for several thousand consultants in the public government, helping people with their finances.
As you speak, Arman, it reminds me sort of the irony of the fact that, and I've been mentioning the research and the data and evidence-based practices for this entire interview, which I wholeheartedly believe in. I've built a career on. But on the flip side, it also reminds me that despite those things, or maybe in addition to those things, when you talk to individuals such as yourself to reflect on their pathways out, they can say, yeah, I went to this programming. I engaged in this cognitive behavioral intervention. I followed the playbook, but it was at one prison officer, or it was at one police officer. Individuals can point to the person who, as you just did, those 3 critical people in your life who believed in you basically and took a chance on you. And I would contend that was as powerful, if not more powerful, than any of those sort of traditional off-the-shelf interventions. Not that I'm dismissing those, but I'm saying we need to take a broader look at everything that is going to help individuals desist from a life of crime. And that includes building those critical relationships like you just highlighted, Arman.
Yeah. No, it's just, I totally agree with you, Joe. And all those three, I've thought this many times afterward. What did they do? What was their common thing? Because they don't know each other, and they still acted with them. They were really brave, and they took a risk on me, because the policeman, he could just arrest me and put me onto prison, and it would do his job. And Mette, she was taking me out of the prison to walk in the streets of my home city just to get me talk like she wanted. Because inside the prison, I was just concerned about my reputation. And Kari, the leader, she hired me against all odds. So it could fail. So everyone was really brave. They took a risk on me. And so I stayed in this organization for 15 years. So just out of loyalty, not only loyalty, but I wanted to show Kari that she didn't mess this up with hiring me. So risk, bravery, and also with non-judgmental approach, because they wanted to learn how is it to be a criminal. And Kari, she was actually trying to see if my skill set from the criminal world was adaptable into the normal world. And that was, I think that's maybe the most fantastic any person has done for me, because she was 65 years old, almost a pensioner. She had never done any criminal. She didn't understand anything of the life, but still she sat down on the job interview and asked me several questions. So when you're working as a GHB distributor, you had to have budget, income, expenses, and profit. Yeah, I did. Well, when you are going to work as a debt advisor, you need to put up a budget for private persons. So you need to know about finances. So then you know that. You have put up budgets. So that was one thing that she saw. And the other thing was, you are good in negotiations, because I worked with like collecting money from my drugs and so on, but I never hit anyone. I was just talking. So then she said, well, you're good in talking. And that is also very useful, because negotiations with creditors and people that have money, that you owe money, as a debt advisor, you need to negotiate with them. So she clicked a lot of the boxes. And also this word, then when she said, well, what happened if you were talking about criminal things and didn't keep your mouth shut? Oh, that was dangerous, Kari. Oh, I heard so. And in the public government, we have a very high confidentiality duty. So we cannot speak about any clients. So then you know all about that as well. You are totally, yeah, you're right, Kari. And then I got the job, as I told you, Joe. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about that later, your job as a financial wellness expert. But as you speak, it reminds me also that when we talk about this process of leaving crime or desistance from crime, yeah, it starts with those behavioral changes, right? Stopping illegal activity, what we call primary desistance. But when we drill down and look at secondary desistance, that's all about building a new identity, which I think is, again, underrepresented in our current frameworks. We don't utilize this superpower as much as we should. What did that process look like for you when you were building a new identity. And again, I know you've already been sort of alluding to it, but as that identity shift took place, what were some of those challenges that you faced going through that transformative process?
Well, the drug addiction were maybe the easiest part to address. The criminal mindset were the most difficult because I can use a lot of money, so I need to shift my mindset about myself. That was the first thing. And I needed help for that. So I was into drug rehabilitation for 15 months. And that was maybe the most important thing, because then I was drug-free for 15 months. And we can work on those identity shift and also the kind of things that I saw that when I was open and asked for help, I understood right quickly that people wanted to help me. So in the beginning, it was like almost using this criminal mindset again and taking advantage of a situation, like manipulation in a way. But it isn't. It's something completely different. It's all about human nature, because I think you and me, Joe, loves to help people, and we want to be a good contribution of anyone that receive that we have value for others. So if people ask me today about, can you help me with something, I get a bit proud, and do you want help from me? Yes, of course, I want to help you. And that I saw in my rehabilitation. If I dare to be open, then people wanted to help me. And that was my biggest advantage. I learned the skill set of asking for help.
That's the second time you've mentioned that. You learned that skill set for asking for help. And again, this is why I love talking to individuals such as yourself. And I mentioned those sort of off-the-shelf cognitive behavioral interventions. And indeed, that's one of those that we try to impart onto our clients, because we realize they lack that basic skill set of asking for help, something that many of us learned, in our childhoods, in our teenage years, our formative years. But you're right. A lot of individuals who are still entrenched in the criminal justice system, one of those skill deficits, it's merely that they've just lack the ability to ask for help. And of course, because of that results in criminality, because they're not asking for help. They're taking shortcuts. They're breaking the law. They're hurting people. So again, I just love speaking to you, Arman, because it's sort of a proof of concept, I guess, for a lot of the things that we do.
Yeah, but it's also important to remember, if I didn't meet those three people that I trusted, I wouldn't dare to ask for help, because if they were like judging me or laughing at me, or I didn't trust them, I wouldn't open myself at all. So it's also a message to all people around. You have to take a look inside the mirror to see how are you looking for other people. So which tag do you think people put on you when they see you? And how good are you in creating this atmosphere? I call it the temperature in the room. Because if you're going to ask for help, which is the most vulnerable moments in life, it's almost like undressing yourself. If you create the right temperature in the room, then it's much easier for others. And that is a skill set, and that can be taught and learned.
Yeah, 100%. And again, you just continue to reaffirm all of these best practices, up to and including at the foundation of all of our, what we call evidence-based practices, is the importance of establishing a relationship. Whether you want to call it a working alliance, a therapeutic alliance, a relationship. I always tell individuals in the field that I train, probation officers, corrections officers, if your clients don't trust you, then everything that I'm attempting to impart on you is moot. It's all for nothing. I don't care if you if you can mimic all these behaviors we're asking you to do as far as motivational interviewing, risk assessment, cognitive behavioral interventions, all of that is for naught if your clients don't trust you. And it's because of what you just said, Arman, because we're asking them to be vulnerable and no one's going to be vulnerable with somebody that they don't trust.
Correct.
And I'm just floored by how many, again, well-intentioned practitioners, probation officers struggle with that concept that their clients have to trust them.
Yeah, and it's all about, you have to choose what you see, because you cannot fail, you cannot trick them. They will sometimes you will get revealed on that. So you need to choose: do you see the positive or do you see the negative?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, there's a study that I often cite, again, when I train folks. It's based on what they call the Pygmalion theory, but it's what you just said, is that a professional's or a practitioner's belief in the client directly correlates to outcomes. And I don't care if that's doctors and patients, school teachers and students, probation officers and their clients. But if the practitioner does not have a belief in that person, despite their behaviors, like you said, you can't fake it. There's data that shows, oh yeah, the practitioner who believes in the student, in the client, in the patient, in their parolee, that correlates into effectiveness.
Yeah, and if you add one perspective dimension one dimension up on that layer, if you are willing to be vulnerable yourself in those meetings, then you have it. If you take some risk yourself, because those three in my story, they all took risk, and I noticed that.
Yes.
So it's almost like you said to the first time to your fiancé or something, I love you, and you don't know the answer, and you take some risk.
Yes.
And this kind of, yeah. So it's all about taking a risk.
There's another concept which I've really been leaning into, and it's that of, and you just articulated it, Arman, is that the practitioners need to practice more self-disclosure, right? They have to show that I am like you. We do have some commonalities. I know for years, particularly when I was starting out in my career many decades ago, the rule of thumb was, do not tell these people anything about your personal life, Joe. You cannot let your guard down. You have to be professional. And when we're trained, for example, don't have any indication in your life that you're married, that you have kids, that you do anything outside of this job. But now, to your point, we're realizing that, no, those practitioners who engage in a little bit of self-disclosure, and to be clear, I'm not saying probation officers should tell their clients where their children go to school or provide their home addresses, but just sharing things like, for example, oh, I can relate. I raised a teenage daughter, or, oh yeah, when my boss gets on my nerves, sort of that getting out of that us versus them, and the client will respond accordingly.
Yeah, 100%. And even if you cannot share the same experience, you can share the feelings, because we have all been feeling guilty in something, or we have feel less worthy. If you lost your job, sometimes you can talk about that. So I totally agree with you. You shouldn't take over the conversation with your problems or what you have overcome. But it's important to understand that people wants to meet people.
Yes.
With their mistakes and positivity. We want to meet people that are like us.
Right.
Like us, between equal, yeah.
Even minor things. I tell folks, even small things, like if your client is late for your appointment and they sit down and they're frustrated because they couldn't find a parking spot or that traffic was slow. Even if you can relate on that level and say, oh, you're right, traffic is crazy this time of year and I hate finding a parking spot. Anything that gets at that sort of we're in this together and reduces what I call that power differential. I'm above you. You must do what I say. You'll get better results if you just tear that wall down just a bit even.
And try also to be vulnerable. Take a bit of a risk sometimes just to create this relationship that are needed. Because when people are going to change their life, like me and a lot of other that you have met, Joe, it takes, it's so hard. So you need to meet people that are really good in meeting people in crisis.
Arman, I promised I was going to circle back to it. You emphasize financial wellness in your work. How important is that financial stability in preventing recidivism, reoffending, and what financial lessons do you wish more people in the justice system had access to?
Well, it's a really important question. And I want to circle back to my rehabilitation a bit, because I told you that I became an expert in asking for help.
Yeah.
And when I was moving out of rehabilitation, started as a social worker education, I also get some kind of a settlement with my creditors. Is that the right words in English? Do you understand?
Yes.
And I had 200,000 in debt, as I told you. And I got this lucrative settlement with them. If I just paid a minimum of £100 or $100 a month for 5 years, the rest of it will disappear. But I didn't have any kind of knowledge about how to set those $100 aside each month and pay them once a year. So I used those money. So I almost lost this settlement. It was so close. And this settlement you will only get once. So if you lose that, I'm finished. So the only thing I didn't ask for help was my money problems. It was full of shame, because money had been my identity. I had used money as no one else. So money was so connected and rooted into my DNA. Arman is money. If you don't have money, you're not a success. Because now I didn't have any access to my money that I had in the old days. So I needed to just have loans from the government for studying. And that was really, really hard. And I remember that I, one night, was actually considering calling my old gang environment to ask for a small job, or to ask my mother so she can get me a loan for, I think it was $1,000 that I was behind with my payments. So I said, should I do that? Or should I call my mother? My old, what's the worst part yet? And luckily for me, I called my mother, and she said, "What? Haven't you learned anything in rehabilitation about money?" I knew she would say that. And at that time, I decided myself that I would fix my money, my everyday economy, the feelings connected to money, establish routines for my everyday economy, and I wanted to help others with their financial worries. So money problems are, I think it is almost 100% for every person that has sit into prison for a long time. And we have, or I should say, for me, a very unhealthy relationship to money, because I've never learned money, how to spend money, because my father and mother didn't teach me anything. So my heritage from my childhood when it comes to the money was totally wasted. And when I was learning to steal money, and that money could give me identity, belonging, and everything when I was 16, 17 years old, it was so hard. And I think all inmates coming out has kind of unhealthy, or I don't find the words for it, but some kind of a misconception about money. So we need to teach them from the bottom again.
Let me ask you a question, Arman. I know I've talked about my role conducting traditional risk assessments where we look at those major correlates to criminality, whether it's struggles with addiction, dysfunctional family relationships, certainly negative peers, risky thinking patterns. And we've also identified employment as one of those. But as you speak, it reminds me that I think we need to take a deeper look at that and not just simply view that, again, in this sort of binary, you're employed, you're unemployed, you're employed, you're unemployed. I always tell folks, getting your job a client at the local car wash or any of those businesses that will hire anybody with a pulse, basically, regardless of their criminal history, that's not instilling in them the skill sets that you just described.
No.
There's a difference between financial wellness and collecting a paycheck. I always try to emphasize to those I train that, a pay stub isn't reducing risk. It's those things that come with the job, the positive network of employees that you're around, the routine, the fact that working full time takes away all that downtime that a lot of folks struggling with addiction find as a trigger. But maybe speak more about that it's not just a matter of, I found you a job at the local factory that will hire anybody, and I can check that off my to-do list for Arman. There's more to it than that.
Well, I think that we are all individuals with different skill sets, and someone can work at a local factory, someone can work with shoveling snow where we have a lot of snow now in Norway. But some can even be CEOs. I think ex-criminals coming out from prison can have so much different skill sets. The employers, they need to understand the potential that comes with different experiences. So if they can do like Kari, that actually converted my skill sets into more positive things, that comes with a great upper side. And I don't think many people thought that this gunman from Molde, which was my name, should be a debt advisor just a few years in front of us now. But because she did, I got the job. And
the message I was trying to get across to the listener was, if you are a professional, don't simply view that first milestone of securing employment as the be-all, end-all. I can check that off my list from the judge or from the prison release authority that, my client has secured gainful employment. But take a deeper look, like your 3 people in your life did, and realize that's just the start of this journey to stability and change, right? But look at things like, has my client ever had a checkbook? Have they ever had a banking account? Do they know how to file taxes? I mean, there's more to financial wellness than simply getting hired at a job.
Many of those people, me included, didn't have any kind of digital knowledge about things. So things we take for granted are nothing. You shouldn't take things for granted. So it's all about, because it's a lot of shame connected to that as well. So by being interested and non-judgmental in your questions about things to your employee, that will have a crucial good effect. And also, and this is maybe not the employer's responsibility, but if people haven't had the chance to learn more about money set, they will probably get into the financial worries one more time. And in Norway, we had some kind of different settlements that you can get financial advising from the public government, which was my previous position 15 years ago. But I guess there is, I don't think that's all over the world, but I think also the employer should acknowledge that this could actually be a problem. So by addressing those things, I know you come from that kind of place where you haven't maybe learn about the finances. And is there anything I can do to help you about that? Because I have some knowledge about that. So creating these openness cultures where your new employee dare to talk to you about what I'm struggling with, what are the objectives, and so on.
Arman, I want to shift gears a little bit. Regular listeners of the show know that I've co-developed a supervision model known as TIDES, which is short for Trauma-Informed Desistance. And the model involves what we call 4 pillars of change. Those are self-regulation, identity, resilience, and social support. And you've already talked a great degree about your identity transformation and maybe even a little bit about your self-regulation. You talked about changing your mindset, which is related to self-regulation. But I want to talk about resiliency now. Many people who leave prison, leave the justice system, struggle with setbacks and self-doubt. Arman, how did you develop resilience, and what advice do you have for those who are, again, currently struggling with resiliency?
Resilience for me was and I learned in rehab, trying to see myself as not a failure, but going from a criminal to a resource. So that was, and it was almost, and in the beginning I was sitting with hoodies, even if I had been non-criminal for maybe a year. I still loved that identity because I wasn't ready to leave everything behind, because the hoodie was my trademark. So I remember some person said to me, well, if you're going to have a job someday, you need to also to remove the hoodie, because you have so many other disadvantages that could fail you. So please reduce the other risks that are easy to get rid of. So I remember I used a lot of time to see myself as a resource. And I also had to reconnect with my family to ask for forgiveness. And that was also important for me. And that was also part of the learning to ask for help perspective. But another important step for me was, instead of, I build confidence with actions, doing things. And I did small thing every day that made myself a bit higher on the ladder. So I understood for myself, if I build it a little bit more now, I have built the ladder so high that it's so costly for me to go back. So I tried to add positivity, and that worked for me. And I was really lucky as well, because I was coming into the social worker education, and where I was a bit open. I wasn't open to the whole class because it was 100 people, but my nearest class, it was 10 students. I told my story to them, and they were, have you been a criminal? Tell me more. We love your story. So I was almost like a rock star for a minute there. So because I was seen, I became heard. I understand that I had some value. So I was a bit lucky, but I also took some strategic steps there, and I have found the right people around me at all times. I build myself a support team, world-class support team. That is important as well.
Which is a great segue to my next question. And I know I just rattled off those 4 pillars of change in our TIDES model: self-regulation, identity, resiliency, and then the 4th one is social support. And what I've also realized in the construction of this model, and again, you just sort of, in your own individual way, gave a little bit of proof of concept, is when we train on this model, we say, these four pillars are all interconnected. They all have sort of a collateral effect on them. So, for example, if you work on a client's identity, by definition, you're also going to have an effect on their resiliency. Or if you work on someone's identity, well, let me say this another way. If you focus on growing someone's social support network, you're also going to alter their identity and improve their self-regulation and build their resiliency. Again, they're all sort of interconnected. You've alluded to the value of building your social support network. So let's just go there, whether it's family, community, or mentorship, support systems are so crucial to change. You've talked about some of the key people, the three key people in your life, but what were some other folks that you met along the way when you were growing your positive social support network in your journey, Arman?
Yeah, and actually I was also doing a lot of physical activities. That was really important for me, for my mental health, but also for getting out into the nature and so on. So I enrolled in a local running club, which was really important for me, and people were there also like to help me. Maybe that was because I wasn't a competition to them because I was running so slowly.
Right.
But anyway, they were helping me. And so I became a part of a society, a triathlon club, actually. So I'm still doing Ironmans today, even if I get lost in every competition almost. So that was important for me to find resilience in my health because I've used so much drugs. So my physical and mental health are on stake here. So I would do anything I can to live as long as I can with those negative factors that I put into my body. So that means I take those things really seriously. And relationships are important for me. And I also met my wife. We have been married now for 12 years, I think, actually. And she took a chance on me, I have to say, because I was still a social worker, just barely became a social worker at the time. But she said, and the most difficult part for me was that I didn't dare to become a father again, because I was afraid of being a failure as a father. And I was also afraid that my kids will grow up and be like me, and who wants that for their kids? But she said, you are more than good enough to become a father to my kids. And she is a midwife, actually, so she knows what she talks about. And then I also got kids, and they are now 7 and 9 years old. And they're growing up in an uncertain world, so we have to give them their best advice. And I have some advice, maybe too many advice sometimes.
Hey, you mentioned how in building your social support, you found a community of runners. I want to talk to you about your Run and Smile event, your Tour Day Waves. Tell the listeners about that. I think that is an amazing endeavor that you're involved with.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the pandemic, because at that time I was actually quitting my job as a financial advisor and becoming a public speaker 6 weeks before the pandemic. And that was a terrible timing. So at that time I didn't have any things to do because the whole society was shut down and everyone was behind the mask and everyone was afraid, and I missed those smiles. So I said, okay, let's try to run and to smile to all people you meet on your travel. So in the beginning, I was just trying to run from 12K or something and to smile and say hello to everyone I met. But suddenly I saw that this could be actually an event, a run and smile event. So I started planning that, and I run for 200 kilometers. And I my ambition were to smile to so many people as possible and to get people to talk to, strangers that I never talked to before. And I learned so much about how to speak to strangers, because a smile, that could lead to a conversation, and a conversation could lead to openness, and openness can solve problems. So I received 1,000 smiles, and I was also interviewed on the television on this, and they said, well, do you think that you can help someone with a smile? Well, I said, I don't know, but that smile could actually be the only smile that person will receive that day. And I know, because of the 5 minutes with the policeman, that this small little conversation could lead to a bigger chain reaction. So if my conversation on my running trip with the strangers could mean that they would listen even more careful to the next person that tries to help them, that would mean the world to me. So I'm doing some regular social experiments like this to create moments of connection.
You've sent me some YouTube clips of these smile runs, which I will embed in the episode description of this podcast to share. I just love this idea. I just love the principle behind it. And it looks like you've got another, what you call your Tour de Wave, coming up here in the spring of 2025 as well.
Yeah, we will try to do the third one. And people can, of course, join that from where they ever are in the world, because this will be, of course, covered in the social media. And I will, of course, try to ask people to be a part of that wherever they live. Try to run and smile to people where they are and see what happens. And sometimes you will not get a smile in return, but that's okay. It's not all about you. It could be something with them. It could be they can have a bad day. So still continue smiling. And I do it as my default now. I smile and say hello to everyone I meet, not only when I'm running, but also on the streets, on the way into the airplane, on the train, on the bus. Oh, sometimes my kids get tired of me because I always have to stop talking to people.
It's a great philosophy. It's a great way to be with folks. I try to do the same. As you said, I travel a lot, and whether I'm dealing with people at the airport or restaurants, I just realized, like you said, I don't know what this person's going through. We're going to interact with each other today as two humans, and I can leave one of two impressions. I can either, improve that person's mindset and disposition, leave a bad taste in their mouth. And like you said, a smile is free. Being courteous is free. It doesn't cost anything. And if it doesn't take hold, that's fine. But if it does, then I want to be that person that when that person goes to bed at night, they think, oh, I had one nice person at the coffee shop today, or there was one person at the airline counter that didn't insult me and make me feel bad just for doing my job. I just love that mindset. Yeah. Hey, speaking of mindsets, Arman, I have a tagline when I sign off on the show. Every episode, I remind the listeners, there's no them, there's only us. I'm always trying to get out of this binary us versus they. A lot of that has to do with, and you mentioned this, the labels, the tags, the stigmas that people put on us just because of, for some individuals at least, the worst thing they did on the worst day of their life. But we're going to look at them through that label for the next however many years. How do you challenge those societal stigmas that we see against formerly incarcerated individuals? And what can businesses or policymakers do to just create better opportunities for reintegration simply by changing the stigma that we have for folks who are justice involved?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for me, I try to break the stigma through my storytelling.
Yeah.
So that's the most important. But I understand and I recognize that not everyone wants to share their experience. And that's maybe the most important part for me, doing that, telling that, because most people that change their life, they just want to be in the normal life. They don't want to speak about their ex-criminal life. So that means that so much valuable information get lost here. So that's why I tell my story, and it costs me a lot because I have to relive a lot of my experiences. But I think it's worth it 10 times because I can see that other people go out from the audience when 1,500 people goes out of the audience and tell me afterwards, well, now I'm going to look at this person totally different already tomorrow. That is powerful. And more powerful than for me talking to one, which I do from time to time, but having 1,000 people listening to that and all said, you're right. So that's the most important part for me. But I also try to work with the educational system and policymakers and businesses, trying to hire people with my background and to see that you shouldn't hire an ex-criminal because of charity, because that's the wrong entrance. You need to do it because it could be the best hiring you have done in years. So when you understand that shift, it has an open possibilities. But we need to work with the attitude on that one. And I also need to work with, I call it the talents. So they also understand the power they have. They can become whatever they want almost. You shouldn't, I don't say that you should be a public speaker like me, but you have unique skill sets that could be developed. Don't take yourself like you are just an ex-criminal. And if I get one job, that's the best I can hope for. You can actually change that. So we have to work on both sides. So, and I also need to work with the government. I do that from time to time. So it's so restricted where ex-criminals can work. And I understand that I can never be a policeman, even if I could be a brilliant police officer. My brother is a police officer, so that will cover us. There is so many limitations, and it's all about attitude. And I don't know how in the US, but in Norway now we have a very, very low, very high employment rate. So there is very few people unemployed. It has never been a better time here in Norway to get people that are hard to get a job, to get those inside the workforce now. So I think also, I don't know how you have in the US, but it would be great if you can establish incentives like tax breaks, subsidies for companies that hire and train individuals with record. That could be something. Making mentor programs. And I think it could be mentor programs inside businesses. So that one person that has a special skills, special position that can work with people with my background. And maybe something like fair chance hiring policies that that doesn't automatically exclude candidates based on background checks. I don't know, something like that.
You may have already answered this question, Arman, but if you had this superpower, if you will, or could, wave your magic wand, is there one thing in the justice or reentry systems in Norway or even globally that you would change? What would that be and why?
It has to be the resources. It has to be something, because in Norway, and I think it's also in other countries, and there are so hard to educate people sitting there, making them ready for the life that comes after. I think it's so valuable to put enough money on this education in the prisons, so they can have a normal life afterwards. And it has to be a combination from the prison and with the outside world, that much more not to co-working, but they need to coordinate much better. And I see it in Norway, people coming out from prison, they're put back into the same society as before. It's really hard to succeed with getting a new life then. So I say also to the companies, big companies in Norway, when you're starting to hire new people, why don't you look in the prisons? You can start training people in the prisons so they are ready to come to work with you when they are finished. So if you work like a chef on a big restaurant, why shouldn't you, instead of making banana split in the prison, if you work on the kitchen, you can make a salsa salad, beef, and 2 more signature dishes on this restaurant. Train in the prison, and when you get out, you can start working almost at once. And then you can take the rest of the menu in a while. But then you have enough skill sets to start working. And that is the most important thing, I think. You need to have a work. You need to feel that you are part of society. You need to feel that you are like everyone else, special, but like everyone else.
I mentioned those various stages of desistance early: primary, which is behavioral; secondary, which is the assumption of a new identity; and then there's that all-elusive tertiary desistance, which you just described, Arman, which is, has the community welcomed me back as a member? Am I now a member of this pro-social tribe again, or am I still an outcast with a scarlet letter? I'm a felon. I'm a criminal. True desistance does not happen until, again, that individual is welcomed back into society as a member of, again, that cohort. And that's what as a community, we struggle with that a lot.
Yeah, that's a double punishment or triple punishment.
Yeah. There's an amazing documentary produced by Shad Maruna and Fergus McNeil and Stephen Farrell and others called The Road from Crime. But when they interview people who've been released from British prisons, one of the common denominators that they voice is that, for me, the real punishment started when I left prison. Which I think if the public realized that, they would think, what? I thought you paid your debt to society. And they all say, no, the real punishment starts when you have to start navigating those societal biases and roadblocks that communities put up to keep us out of your tribe, your community. We've got to get past that.
We have to, 100%.
What's next for you, Arman? We've covered a lot during this interview. I could talk to you all day, but when I get you back on the podcast in a year or 2 years or 5 years, look into your crystal ball, and in your best case scenario manifestation, what do you think we might be chatting about when I get you back on the show?
Oh, well, I think I've reached an international audience. I'm trying now in 2025 to get my talks internationally. So I had the rehearsal in English. So thanks you for bringing me on the show, Joe, so I can rehearse. But that is, and the topic is, of course, diversity, and not the word, the regular diversity, but different experiences. I'm very occupied with that kind of expressions and how to see the potential. So I think that is something that are common in the whole world, how we can utilize potential that lies in people that has falling out, not just on the ex-criminals, but other persons that are falling out as well. And all about talking about these human meetings, how important they can be. And maybe I'm running through the US, waving and smiling and meet you there. But I just need to get into the US because I don't have access there because of my background, but I'm working with that.
That's a great aspirational goal. I would love to see you and or join you on one of your smile runs. I just love that concept so much. It's one of those things that, you hear the best ideas sometimes are the most basic. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's that sort of, law of first principles. Like, you don't have to look too deep. Oftentimes the most obvious solutions are the ones right in front of us.
Yeah. And what people say to me most is that, but I do smile, don't I? Well, maybe not. Maybe you're not smiling because you don't pay attention to that. So if you put this pen in here, that's the size of the smile. And you have this beautiful smile. So that kind of smile you should put on your face and to see how that affects others around you. It has a great effect.
Arman, I could talk to you all day. We'll have to get you back on the show sooner rather than later. Arman Vestad, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, I will leave your YouTube links, any website links, any promotional things within the description of this podcast so folks can learn more about you. I hope our paths will one day cross in person. I get to Europe semi-regularly, so yeah, I would love to connect. And I know we've got some mutual connections in Norway as well that we're sort of behind getting this interview set up. So maybe we can have a little reunion over there as well. Arman, thank you so much for your time. Until we talk next, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, my interview with Arman Vestad. A powerful reminder that desistance from crime isn't just about leaving something behind. It's about building something new, a new identity, a new mindset, a new way of seeing yourself in the world. As Arman shared, his transformation wasn't a single event. It was a process rooted in resilience, the ability to face setbacks without surrendering the larger vision. It was fueled by social support, those three helpers who saw Arman's potential and gave him space to grow. And it was made real by the reconstruction of his identity, no longer defined by his past, but by the purpose he now brings to every stage he steps on. For those of you familiar with the TIDES supervision model, Arman's journey beautifully illustrate the pillars we emphasize: self-regulation, identity, resilience, and social support. His story is a lived example of what's possible when people are met with dignity, structure, and belief. And that's what we're here for, to highlight the stories, the science, and the strategies that drive meaningful change. If Arman's message moved you, I encourage you to explore more of his work at armanv.no and follow his upcoming Tour de Wave in the spring of 2025. And of course, if you want to learn more about TIDES and how our model is reshaping supervision across the globe, visit us at thetidesllc.com. That's thetidesllc.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and above all, stay committed to the people behind the process. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
So instead of arresting me, one of the policemen was sitting down next to me, and he was almost pulling me up to himself because I was lying on the floor there. And he kept his arm around me, and he said, "Well, Arman, this doesn't look good. Is there anything I can do to help you? Just say the words, and I will try to do whatever I can in my position." And I have never felt so close to any person. And you have to understand that this was a policeman I hated the police.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, training opportunities, program design, or interview requests, visit theparagongroup.llc.com. To learn more about the TIDES supervision model, a trauma-informed, desistance-based approach to community supervision, please visit TIDESLLC.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out the Criminologist YouTube channel for additional content, including exclusive video interviews and international insights. Both the Criminologist podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star review. And as always, thank you for listening.